Archie, financial alignment is really important in healthy relationships, isn't it?
Absolutely. Let's dive in. I'm Archie Hoxton.
And I'm Rob Hoxton.
And this is Last Paycheck, weekly wisdom to help you retire and stay that way. Welcome back to the Last Paycheck Podcast, brought to you by Hoxton Planning and Management. We're your hosts, CFP professionals, Archie Hoxton and Rob Hoxton. And today we're going to be talking about financial planning as a couple and the importance of coordinating and communicating and kind of figuring out how to do financial planning as a unit. And because it can be pretty complicated, and really, as most of us know, money issues are one of the leading causes of divorce and just general marital strife. So it's really important to think intentionally about money as a couple.
It is, and so much about the way that we interact with money is grounded in our early childhood, right?
Yeah.
I remember when I was young in the financial planning profession, I had a mentor who asked me what my first memory of money was. And I explained it to him, and he thought, okay, well, that is a real window into who you are. And it's true. If you think about what was your first, money memory, it will, and maybe as a couple, you ask each other that question.
Yeah.
Because it can be very helpful in understanding kind of where your partner's coming from.
Yeah, we all relate to money in different ways.
Mm-hmm.
Some of us, it's very much a security thing. Some of us, it's about fun and enjoyment. This is almost a whole episode on its own that we can do.
Right. But within money, within the whole sort of big money umbrella, there are specific areas where you can find friction, right?
Oh yeah, yeah, and that's where issues in a marriage can start to arise, is where you have these friction points. And it's important, from the very beginning of getting married, to have discussions about money and how you relate to it and how you're going to manage it. But then it remains important throughout. When you add things like debt, that's like, being in a pressure cooker. So,
Right.
if you have unaddressed areas of friction, adding things like debt that add weight and stress can make it worse. So it's really important throughout your entire life.
One of the big ones that I see is, how do we spend our money?
Yeah.
And do we look at money in terms of my money, your money, my money? Or how does that work? What is that dynamic? And even to take it even a step further is the question of what we call financial infidelity.
Yeah.
Like you may be honest and true to your spouse, i.e., with respect to relationships with other people, but you may not. I mean, some people don't practice fidelity when it comes to money. They have like secret stashes and they spend money on things and they don't tell their spouse.
Yeah.
I mean, it's
racking
not
up credit card debt over here.
Yeah. I mean, it can be hugely destructive in a relationship. So
Yeah.
Financial infidelity.
Yeah. And any ways that you can reduce these areas of friction. I know, like you'd mentioned, sort of my money, your money. There can be natural imbalances there if you have one spouse who works, one who doesn't, or if you have a spouse who makes a lot more money than the other spouse. It's easy, if you don't have a creative solution, for resentment to start to grow.
Mm-hmm.
We have an equal share of the bills, but we don't have equal incomes. Is that fair? And so the idea of keeping things separate or completely combining, having one financial life together as a unit, or something in between, partially shared, partially separate. It's important to figure that out and lay out serious ground rules to try to identify future friction points.
Mm-hmm. And Dave Ramsey, the very popular radio show host and podcaster, has often said, I've heard him say, that you aren't really married unless you've combined your finances.
Yeah,
And-
yeah, that's a pretty serious
Yeah.
approach. And
Yeah.
I do think that it,
I'm
if
not
you
saying
fully
that
combined,
that's the only way to do it, of course, but
Right.
it's an interesting point that he makes.
it can come with unique challenges, but you can also avoid some of the friction that comes with like mismatched income and things like that.
So what are some of the other friction points?
Another would be with investing and how to invest your money. So you may have one member in the couple that is more conservative, one that's more aggressive, and so often one is kind of getting their way. I find it's often the more aggressive, the more aggressive person. And so then you have the conservative person who's always kind of living with this sort of anxiety about risk in the markets.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas the aggressive person in the couple is happy and, perfectly content. So having a mismatched risk tolerance can cause some issues.
Sometimes the person with the more aggressive risk tolerance is also the more aggressive person in the relationship. It's interesting. Just a couple of weeks ago, I had a prospective client in the conference room with me, and the meeting, we got about 45 minutes into the meeting and then started talking about their feelings about risk, investment risk, and the meeting just went off the rails. And the meeting basically ended with them needing to go home and figure out, how they're going to reconcile their feelings about risk.
Yeah. Yeah. Because, when you have a giant goal like retirement, it's much more difficult to plan for that separately, especially if you have unequal resources, whether
Mhm.
it's Social Security benefits, pensions, investment assets. It becomes more realistic once you kind of put your resources together. But that is where you have to find the right risk tolerance. So you can't have one client who's overly conservative and one who's overly aggressive and have these plans separate, because the more conservative plan may fail due to being too conservative. Could be the same for the more aggressive plan, but
Yeah.
these things have to come together.
Another situation, couples dynamic that we see a lot also is you have one that's inclined to be more involved
Mm-hmm.
in the finances and the other one who just doesn't want to participate at all.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because sometimes the spouse who doesn't want to participate won't even come to meetings.
Mm-hmm.
And that presents a planning issue, right?
Yeah.
And I know it causes some stress in the relationship. But what happens if the person who's involved passes away?
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, the person who hasn't wanted to be involved doesn't really have the tools to run their personal finances.
Right.
If you're working with a financial advisor, then at least there's somebody that's familiar with your financial situation who can then step in and be of assistance. But I mean, it's time for everybody to put their big boy and big girl pants on and be involved in their finances, because it's really, really important if something happens to the other person.
Yeah. Yeah. So it is important. And that could also be a source of difficulty and frustration if you have one spouse that is taking care of that, is involved, understands it, and the other is sort of checked out. That can, cause some arguments.
Yeah, it can lead to misunderstandings and miscommunication. So if you're the person who kind of makes the financial decisions in your family because your partner doesn't really want to be involved, then you might assume that a financial decision is one that is appropriate for both people. And sometimes it's not. And then there can be, serious resentment that comes from that and arguments. So that's, that involvement by both partners is important.
Well, because it often takes action. It requires action to be taken and habits to be formed when you're doing financial planning. So another big area of friction that's sort of related to that is the spending versus savings balance. Sometimes you'll get two people who get married and one has more of a their approach to money is more about spending and fun and enjoyment, and the other whose approach to money is more about security and saving. And so sometimes that can create some strife where you've got one who spends and maybe spends too much, even just objectively from a financial planning perspective, and the other who wants to save and be, more conservative with how they spend their money. And sometimes you'll see this is even more magnified with people who do separate finances, because you've got one member of the spouse of the household, and who's saving and preparing for the future and building a retirement nest egg, and the other who's maybe not, or maybe not quite as quickly, and who's spending more. And so, if you're managing your finances together, of course it can still be an issue, but at least you're making progress towards a goal. If you're managing them separately, there's a big opportunity for resentment and frustration, because one spouse is planning for the future and the other is kind of enjoying the moment. This one knows at some point, we're gonna have to live on my money. So that's another area where you could end up with a pretty significant source of friction.
Archie, what if, we've talked about some of the ways that you can have strife in your financial married life, or even if you're not married, long-term, partnerships. What are some of the things you can do to get aligned so that both people are on the same page, and maybe have just one less area that causes stress in your personal life?
Well, I think one area can be to bring in a third party to have the discussions with you, someone who's neutral, who can be objective. If it really is more of a financial thing, then maybe that could be a financial planner or a financial advisor, maybe even, like an estate planner if it has to do more with sort of end of life matters. If it's more interpersonal, then, because we're not therapists, they play an important role if it is more of the interpersonal piece. Could be someone like that. Or there are people who are licensed both ways, as a financial advisor and as a therapist.
Yeah, and there's a whole association, the Financial Therapy Association.
Yeah. So there's a lot of really gifted people there who help with exactly this kind of thing. So that's one way. I would say another way might be setting some ground rules, and maybe it happens in the context meeting with someone, or maybe it's just, okay, this is how we run our financial life. Write it down, agree to it, make concessions. Maybe the heavy saver gets a little bit more comfortable with a little more spending, and the heavy spender gets a little bit more comfortable with a little less spending, a little more saving. And just agree to some ground rules. I think that can be helpful too.
Yep.
There are also ways to kind of uncover differences in your values, whether it's a risk questionnaire or, a money personality questionnaire, so that you can take some time to kind of get to know each other's, money personality. There's a really good chance. I mean, you can be married to someone a long time and all of a sudden find out that, oh, they're a really conservative investor, or, oh, they really value, spending money on experiences, but we don't do that because I run the finances and I'm a saver. So it's realistic that you could go a pretty long time and not even know that about each other. So that can be a good exercise.
Yeah, ask your partner what their first money memory is.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, my first money memory is kind of weird. When I was growing up, we always worked, even as little kids. So we would do chores, whether it be raking leaves or, I don't know, washing windows, and we got paid a little bit for doing it, a very little bit. And I remember at school we were having ice cream day, and an ice cream was, this is going to date me, was 5 cents. And so I worked hard over the weekend, and I had 2 nickels, and I was going to get 2 ice creams because, I've always been a big ice cream eater, and I've always I didn't need to eat the 2 ice creams, but I was going to get 2 ice creams. And when I got to school, my buddy, he didn't have a nickel. So he asked if, he knew I was getting 2 ice creams, and so he asked if I would give him a nickel so he could get an ice cream and we'd each have one. And begrudgingly, I agreed to do it. But it was for my own welfare because I didn't need 2 ice creams. But the thing that I remember most is that he never repaid me for that ice cream.
Yeah.
And I'm 60 years old, and I still remember that.
Yeah. I actually have a similar story, funny enough.
Yeah.
We were, making, bets on who was going to win the Super Bowl that year. And it was like $1. And
you were
I was right.
You were a little kid.
I won the bet. I was a little kid. And never saw that dollar.
He welched.
Yeah. It's just funny. It sticks with me. I don't know why. But who cares? It's $1. But the point is that little things like that can form your perception about money. For us, it sounds like it is about like holding up your end of the deal, and when money is, or when anything's involved, really keeping to your word. But yeah, it is sort of funny.
Yeah.
So those are interesting conversations to have with a spouse, and it doesn't often come up. Sometimes it comes up in our conference room, and oh wow, okay, just learned something new about each other after being married for a long time. So anyway, this is an area that's a pretty massive can of worms, and so we're about out of time for today. Maybe we'll touch on this again in the future, or specifically touch on money personalities. There's different measures and systems that people have categorized money personalities. But we hope that this is interesting to you. We hope that if you like it, you'll like the video, you'll subscribe to the channel, share it with your family and friends. Leave us a comment with your thoughts or any questions, or if you'd like to see a particular topic covered, let us know. We'd love to hear from you all. And so we'll look forward to seeing you next time. You've been watching Last Paycheck, weekly wisdom to help you retire and stay that way. If you like this show, be sure to hit like and subscribe. Last Paycheck is available anywhere you get your podcasts.